brainstorm.
Today's episode is brought to you by the good folks at Yale University Press. This week, they're highlighting the new biography of Alfred Dreyfus, a French military officer falsely accused of treason and banished to years of hellish imprisonment off the coast of South America. Not a feel-good read, but good info to have. Check it out. Available for purchase at Amazon or wherever books are sold.
And away we go. Dr. Troyer, episode 9. Welcome to Killer Inventions.
Dr. Geller, how are you?
Great. I'm excited because you are presenting this episode, so I get to sit back and just hear the story.
True story. Yeah. Fantastic. It sounded like an interesting book in the opening ad. Did Lizzie say, did we get like a promo copy or something? I might check that out.
In fact, I did have the opportunity to read the book just recently. Yeah, I don't know if they call it a galley or if it was the actual book. Great book, super interesting, harrowing tale. I mean, have you heard of what happened to this guy?
Just the blurb that they sent over, but is it like a 500-page?
Well, here's the beauty. It's a slim volume, which means, a couple of sittings, depending on how long you sit. It draws you in, and so it's not going to be a all summer read. You're going to get through it quickly because it's a page turner.
All right, great. All right, send it over when you're done.
This is the second time we've been sponsored by a book, right? Like by a publisher, because we had the Today Is Now sponsorship.
I think they realize we have a very literate demo. You know what I mean? We got some of the NPR types here listening.
Without a doubt. I did hear that there's a movie about that doctor who wrote Today Is Now, Dr. Benjamin, that will be playing in New York this August, I believe, August 7th.
I didn't know that there was a movie.
It's like a documentary about how he conducts his business and how he helps so many people.
Well, that's perfect because we were wondering. It sounded a little bit out there. So I'd like to see what it looks like in practice.
Well, you'll get to see it on the silver screen if you're in New York on August 7th. But Dr. Troyer, any emails or anything of note coming in?
We did get a kind offer from a dive company in Michigan.
Uh-oh. Are they looking for investment? How'd they get your number?
They made a kind offer to take you and I as their guests on some wrecks in either Lake Huron or Lake Michigan, our choice.
Wow.
And so I thought that was pretty cool.
That's incredible. I think there was recently a ship they discovered in Lake Superior, like one of those old ships.
Yeah, that's amazing. They discover them all the time.
Insane.
And I think some of them are sitting down there in a kind of a silty bottom. So that's
sounds
good.
Cozy. Yeah. I mean, if you're going to go down, like fresh water, silt, could be worse.
Are you going to tell us where people listen in from?
I'm going to. And I'm going to start, as they say, stateside with Gallatin, Tennessee. Gallatin. It's near Nashville, 30 miles. I looked it up. Fun fact about Gallatin, it was named after the U.S. Secretary of the Treasury, Albert Gallatin, I think in 1803. So welcome, Gallatin. And then Wickham, Quebec, 80 miles from Montreal, up there in Wickham.
Fantastic.
Any hockey anecdotes with Wickham?
I don't know what the team is in Wickham. That's kind of a weird mix. You think of Wickham being like a type of town to be over in Ontario, whereas in Quebec, you figure you're going to get the French names.
Right. That's true. All right. And then lastly, let's say hello to our friends in Minneapolis, Minnesota, Twin Cities.
Land of lakes.
Land of lakes, but bisected by the Mississippi River. So river and lakes. They've got a lot of water sports, I bet.
Yeah, and my brother and his college roommates met up. They do like semi-regular like reunions, and they did a great multi-day boat trip in the so-called boundary waters.
Wow, where are the boundaries?
Right on the boundary with Canada.
Oh, well, that makes sense why they call it that.
Yeah, but you got it. Like they really control the traffic in there. You got to get a permit for your trip, and it sounded amazing. How about you, me, and Lizzie? That's the next retreat.
Wow, next retreat. treat
canoe.
for brainstorm. Yeah, that could work. I mean, I don't know if I have a sleeping bag for that weather. I have to look. I'm willing to give it a shot. So, Dr. I know today is your episode, and I'm super curious if we are going back to the world of chemistry, or are you going to be throwing us a curveball today?
Curveball. I liked
Wow.
you. The curveball. And I'm going to start out. It might seem like a misdirection, but I'm going to start out just refreshing all of our memory, giving a little context about the disease tuberculosis.
Ooh, sounds bad.
Yeah.
Sounds really bad.
Did you ever get that one?
I did not. I'm very, very fortunate. I was that the consumption? Is that what they called it? Like in those Tennessee Williams, like someone's always coughing and hacking, and they have the consumption. Was that tuberculosis?
I think you're right. Yeah, consumption is the other word for it back in the day.
That's a weird word to use. You know what I mean? Like for an ailment. But okay, go on.
Okay, so nowadays, TB as well as influenza and other diseases were forefront in the minds of not only doctors, but just everyday people, especially like parents,
Right, of course.
And at that time, the conventional wisdom was that open air and good ventilation were essential to preventing an infection with TB. For instance, there was a little trend of educators beginning to design and build open air schools so that the kids wouldn't be.
Wow, it was that prevalent where you have to adjust the architecture of the school. Like that's serious, right?
Yeah, and it wouldn't work like in the winter in Maine.
Whoops. Yeah, it's always like those ideas sound great when it's April. And then you're like, wait a second.
As long as you're in Florida, Texas, or California, that it'll work.
True.
Also, it bears mentioning that, that belief in, the value of fresh air and ventilation.
That's always the thing, yeah.
Yeah, that's been around.
That's
forever.
like Roosevelt going out to the country to cure his asthma. Yeah,
exactly. The thinking is, it's better. The exposure is better for the immune system, better for the lungs, just better for overall development. Okay, now the reason I mentioned the early 1900s is that an unusual invention.
Oh, here we go. Now you're talking about inventions.
Yeah,
on topic.
An unusual invention began to gain popularity during that time, early 1900s, especially in the big cities like New York. Okay, so the invention I'm talking about today is baby cages.
What? That's not an invention. That's a cruel joke. What are you talking about?
I'm going to tell you.
Baby cages.
Yeah.
Is this like a pen?
Sort of, but it's a pen, but it's got a little wrinkle to it. A baby cage was a wire or wooden cage with bedding, and you took the whole structure and you attached it outside the window of city apartment buildings in places like New York and London to help babies get fresh air and sunshine.
Are you punking me? Is this real?
I'm not.
Are you gotta be kidding me?
Thing.
Who came up with this idea?
We'll get into the heroes who invented this.
You're building a bird cage for your kid and putting him out on the hanging off the windowsill?
Initially, this odd contraption was called a health cage.
It's like they spruce it up with the name. It's like the birthday present box. Come on
yeah,
in.
They never really get the name right.
They settled on cage?
Yeah. Remember, humans have not always been as ferociously attached and interested in their offspring as we are now. I mean, in Roman times, it was like a regular thing to it wasn't just assumed that you keep all your kids and feed all your kids. Like they would expose kids, they would just put them out in the woods if there was something wrong with one of them.
Right. But did this cage have one of those things that you have for gerbils where it's like an upside down bottle where the baby or the kid can lean over in the cage and, have some food?
We're going to get into the layout.
Oh, okay. You know what it reminds me of is that commercial where the tent's hanging off like the mountain. It's like, but this is your kid in a cage outside an apartment building in New York. Bizarre.
Yeah, you want to make sure you get the suspension correct. Everything really solidly installed. One of the first to propose and try the baby cage was a Mrs. Robert C. Lafferty.
Okay, that's a funny name. Right?
Of Baltimore and New York. Split time, I guess. An article in the Richmond Times-Dispatch in September 1913 said, in the crowded sections of the big cities, a nurse girl or a mother standing watch over infants has long been a familiar sight. If a baby is to thrive, of course, he must be kept out in the open air and sunshine. This has meant somebody must stand constantly on guard to see that no harm befalls him. A unique plan to relieve busy mothers of this exacting duty without depriving infants of the sunshine and fresh air they require has recently been worked out by Mrs. Lafferty.
Wow.
Mrs. Lafferty does not have children of her own.
What?
But her observation of the troubles of other women set her working out a plan to meet the difficulty. And the infant health crib, which she invented, was the result.
Okay, well, hold on. Clearly invented by someone without kids, right? Because who in their right mind? All right, go on.
I don't know. I mean, think back to when
I'm
they're
not saying
young.
you wouldn't want to. I'm saying, but like practically speaking, you're not going to put your kid in a cage and hang him out the window in New York. It's never going to happen.
But weren't there days, when your kids were little?
And fresh
where,
air. Dude, you're better off in the closet than air in New York.
Okay. The health crib is made of willow and is 2 feet high, nearly 2 feet wide, and about 2.5 feet deep. Placed in this cage-like affair, the baby is absolutely safe. He can't get out to hurt himself. It's padded so he can't hurt himself while in it, and it is so screened and covered that nothing can get in the crib to hurt him. Inside of the willow latticed walls is a mosquito netting to keep out the insects. The top is solid to protect the infant from articles which might be dropped through.
Ooh.
Last bit from the Richmond Times. In the crowded city, this is still the newspaper. In the crowded cities where lawns and meadows are scarce, the baby cage will prove most useful. To meet city requirements, the cage is made to rest on and outside the window ledge. There isn't the slightest danger of the cage with its precious inmate falling out of the window as it is securely clamped to the window frame.
Of course it is, until it's not.
As early as 1908, even before this ad, people had been fiddling around with this. Guess who one of the people was who gave it a ride, gave it a try?
Who gave a baby cage a try?
Yeah.
In what year?
1908.
1908. Was it some early Roosevelt?
Nice.
Are you serious? Is it
Yeah.
really?
Eleanor, she's the young mother.
Oh.
And she's told by her doctor that her baby Anna needs fresh air. And so Mrs. Roosevelt, quote, attached a kind of box with wire on the sides and top to the outside of one of the back windows of her New York home so that the baby could take her morning naps in fresh air and sunshine. Now, unfortunately, apparently Eleanor was also following doctor advice about just letting your baby cry itself to sleep. And
who could hear it? You're in there's taxi cabs driving by.
Well, they don't say, is this their house outside the city or right in the city? But anyway, neighbors did quickly grow tired of the sounds coming from the baby cage. And one particularly angry neighbor threatened to report Mrs. Roosevelt to the New York Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Children.
Oh, my God. Because you're not allowed to hang kids out a window in a cage. I mean, it's not that unreasonable. Frankly, what it really feels like is you don't have a balcony. So we're just going to do this. Because otherwise, just put the kid on the balcony and baby-proof the balcony. Like, isn't that the same thing?
Yeah, so maybe if I had just if you marketed it less as a baby cage and more as a portable balcony, a portable covered balcony.
And don't refer to the resident as an inmate. Right? Because then you're sort of implying that it's a punishment.
Well, again, I mean, there's days when you feel like, the baby deserves a little bit of punishment.
I understand all of that. And I get the more they get their air and are not in my living space, the better. But a cage just sounds so cruel.
Yeah. Even in later years, Mrs. Roosevelt recalled that she was quite surprised by the angry neighbors and that she had been just trying to be a good, modern, conscientious mother.
Okay, now let me ask you a question. Did she create her own cage, or was she purchasing the one from the person? No, she's not getting like the Lafferty's model.
I mean, I don't know if she was had the hammer and nails out, but she had somebody build it for her.
Got it.
Okay.
But so did this start to catch on? Like, am I missing something here? Like, I just somehow know no one's talking about it anymore, but people used to do this.
Exactly. People did used to do this. Okay. In 1922, a woman in Spokane, Washington, Emma Reed, submitted her patent application for her own version of the so-called baby cage.
Here we go.
And the next year, a newspaper in Glens Falls, New York, wrote an approving article about Ms. Reed's contraption, which, okay, her version included a system of drawstrings and pulleys so that mom on the inside of the apartment building can draw curtains on whichever side of the cage is getting too much sun or wind.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay, this newspaper, I don't know why these newspapers are going out of the way to put themselves in lawsuits as defendants, but this one says the occupant of the cage cannot possibly fall out, is protected against rain or snow by the slanted corrugated roof, and enjoys the healthful advantage of unlimited fresh air. In pleasant weather, the child may be kept all day in the outdoor house, eating, sleeping, and amusing itself therein.
It's like, here's a little detached, carport. It's just baby size. And
yeah, it's like a crib, but you just kind of wire it so it's hanging it out.
You're adding an element of danger that doesn't need to be there, because realistically, just move the crib by the window, right? Like, it's the same thing. Open the window and the baby,
I do wonder, like, if you had been a baby that spent substantial amounts of time in the cage hanging out, like, would that necessarily have been traumatic, or on some level might it have been like, oh yeah, it's nice out there, and like I don't have to hear my parents bickering, I don't have to hear Uncle Joe like hacking his consumptive cough, like you know what I mean?
Yes, and you bring up a point that I had not considered in the slightest until you mentioned it, but the crazy amount of trauma from staring, looking over a ledge as like an infant, thinking like you could fall to your death.
You think? See, that's
constantly.
I don't know if you
would
register.
I think it would be traumatic.
Trauma yet. I think you'd be like, oh, this is just what it's like. Fish swimming in water. You're like, oh, this is just how babies are raised, like in a nest.
Yeah, it's fine then, but you are internalizing the fear of being at that height just like, and maybe it even translates to, my parents must have wanted to kill me. Like, who knows how you're going to internalize it later? Of course, as an infant, you're not like, this is interesting. Why would they do this? But you'll come out later. That's my point.
No, I'm saying like maybe on some level, it's like, I love being when you kind of stop at the top of the Ferris wheel and you're just way up there and it's just the breeze is blowing, or
I could see maybe you would like it, but that I'm going to say that's atypical, and I'm not going to define that, but it means not normal. You know what I mean?
Yeah, good definition.
Before we continue, because we have to get in a word from our sponsor.
Okay, sounds good. In troubled times like ours, sometimes the best step of all is to pause, reflect, and get a historical perspective. To that end, Yale University Press has published a fascinating new book about a turbulent moment in French history and a court case which was the O.J. Simpson trial of its time. The book is Alfred Dreyfus, the man at the center of the affair. The author is Dr. Maurice Samuels. And if you think you've had a bad day, read up on old Mr. Dreyfus. It was no picnic on Devil's Island. Available for purchase at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, your independent local bookstore, or wherever books are sold. And if you enter KMA Podcast at checkout, you won't receive a discount, but will feel better about our podcast.
Vive la France. That music evokes a very dramatic, telling of the story.
Yeah. With a little bit sad too, right?
Well, it's tragic what happened to him.
Sounds like it. Sounds heavy.
Let's get back to these baby cages. And I have to say that I'm going to admit that at the beginning, I really did think you were joking.
Yeah. Well, let's get deeper into it. Okay. So I think your reaction is a common one nowadays. And, as dumb and possibly fatal as the whole idea seems
and
now.
Traumatic for the baby.
Sure. It did actually catch on a little bit, especially in New York and London. And even in my extensive research, I actually never did find any account of a baby plunging to its death.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I mean, but you got to figure, even though I couldn't find any newspaper stories, you got to figure at least one or two of them must have dropped.
There must have been a lot of payoffs. Like, whoa, that didn't happen because of the cage, right? That wasn't that piano that fell on the cage. Like, that had nothing to do with it.
Now, even even though these devices were supposedly commonly used, or at least somewhat commonly used in New York and London, by the early 1940s, due to various factors, as well as the medical advances we talked about at the top of the show,
Right.
people did start to shy away from these. One of the big factors in London, of course, is the Nazi air raids during World War
See, when
II.
you're getting bombed, you can't be in a cage.
Correct.
But was this predicated on avoiding tuberculosis?
Tuberculosis,
Was that the main thing?
the flu. It was just,
But
there was
you're
a
going to have to bring the baby back in at some point. So then, they're breathing the same air.
Yeah, but there was also that thing about it's good to be exposed to the elements. In
Right.
some cultures, they still Scandinavian, they'll bundle a kid up and then pop them out in the snow for a nap.
Right. I guess it's just it's an urban adaptation of that type of thing.
Right.
So, okay, so that was what motivated people to get these kids out in fresh air and build up the immunity and so on to avoid tuberculosis.
Yes.
Okay.
And to your point, yes, this invention does occasionally show up till this day on top 10 or top 50 lists of the dumbest inventions of all time. So that, yes.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
I
know you disagree.
To me, it's a mix. But I'm curious about it. Okay, the drawings and the photos of the thing. When we're done with the app, you climb onto Google.
I'm going to check it out.
Look at the pictures. They're amazing. There's a bunch of pictures online, and it's some of them are the way 1-year-olds or 2-year-olds back then looked almost like miniature adults, stuffed in
a pencil thin mustache. It's like Bugsy Malone. It's so true. They all had slick back hair.
Yeah, and they're already broad chested, and Now some of the ones in the photos, the cages do look quite sturdy and well built, and they do kind of.
I knew you're going to come from that perspective. You're really trying to hype up the cages.
Well, no, I was going to say then there's a couple of photos that do look a little more janky, kind of
you have to figure there's knockoff models. What is that, a Lafferty? Well, yeah, it's just not spelled with that phonetic spelling. It's actually GH.
It's Lafferty, but it's
okay. You get the idea.
It's close enough.
If you say it fast enough, it's all the same.
But then again, we are not living with the paranoia. It wasn't just TB, by the way. Spanish flu just freaking was a freight train through the population in whenever that was.
Wasn't that an airborne thing? That seems like you're exposing your child.
Well, but don't you think if you're in a closed room?
I guess but you're with your family.
And the cousins all have it. I don't know. Now, if you are interested in the topic of just sort of alarming kind of parenting techniques through the ages, there's a good book called Act Natural by the author Jennifer Trigg, and that just kind of surveys some crazy parenting wisdom from ancient Rome to now.
But did someone make a lot of money by selling some sort of, name brand version, like the person who got the patent?
No, there wasn't one, from what I can tell, because all these different photos and drawings and stuff.
No one really wants credit for it. I don't know. I mean, I was involved.
You definitely got to get an LLC because you got liability.
It's not going to be a Nobel type thing.
Anyway, so yeah, this book that I just mentioned, she goes back through time and points out, for instance, if you kept having daughters, in ancient Rome, you might say, okay, you know what, we've already got 2 of those, and just put the new one out in the forest for the animals to eat, and just keep trying for a male baby. So, people's feelings about their babies have evolved through time.
I would say so, but on the continuum of let's literally throw you to the wolves and let's put you in a contraption and we're going to install some shades so you don't get sun on you. I mean, of course, it sounds like, well, of course, that's not that bad. You even have shades.
Yeah, you've got shades. What are you complaining about? By the way, that book that I mentioned, it's a good one to read if any of our listeners are young parents and stressed out about what they're doing wrong. You read back through time and you're like, boy, It's amazing that the human species continued.
What were some other like random things, if you remember, from the book? Like a cage is obviously going to be a standout. Like that jumps off the page.
Well, there are ones like that one about exposing kids to really cold temperatures, like the wrap them up in a bunch of layers, but then literally put them out in the snow for a nap. The Germans, I think they like the whole cold temperature thing too, the open windows, and it's good.
Gets the circulation going.
So I'm going to put you down for a skeptic on the baby cage.
Yeah. I mean, so it's one of those things where I don't think marketing actually matters.
There was another weird thing, I think, in the ancient Rome where like the Dr. Spock of his day was saying that a good way to toughen up the skin of the infant or toddler was to just liberally apply salt all the time to the skin.
Ouch. Well, I mean, but don't you go get the salt rub? Like maybe he's ahead of his time. Like that's like a spa treatment, like a salt rub. I'm sure that's not what, a baby wants. Like,
no.
And I'm sure it wasn't like really refined, silky salt. It was probably like rock salt.
Yeah. See,
Ouch.
I'm taking the baby cage, especially if you give me the shades.
Very
the
pro
curtains.
cage. Right. Yeah. No,
Yeah.
I could see what you're thinking. You're on your back. You're staring up at the sky. You're just chillaxing. But it's really scary to be outside the window of a high rise. You know what I mean? When you're a baby.
Okay. Just counterpoint. Do you think this is an invention that could ever have a comeback? Just like a more secure, like absolutely rock solid, nothing's going to happen.
Right.
In a way, you're increasing the square footage of your apartment.
Right.
Baby's getting a little air.
I could see sort of like, those habit trails where you have like a bubble and there's like, you can attach a bubble and then you could send it in another direction. I could see where like you could install one of those types of things, like one of those bubbles from a window and then be able to close it off, almost like a dog door. But you could lock it. So like the baby has to stay in there. And then maybe it has a sunroof, so yes, I could see some sort of, in fact, did we just invent a new baby cage?
We just got to come up with a better name for it. I think what would be cool is you get a new, really nice baby cage. And then inside of that, you have like a little gerbil cage, like a really little mini gerbil cage. So it's looking at the gerbil or the mouse, like running on its hamster wheel, and the baby itself is in the cage,
Unbelievable. Do you want to throw in a cat and maybe like a fishbowl?
Yeah.
That would be cool.
Yeah. And the whole thing becomes just like a meditation on, captivity. You know what I mean? Like, Look, don't feel bad.
I think like we could probably pursue this. Throw up a website and we're selling the modern day cage.
Well, especially with Amazon. I mean, if you just get enough ratings or you get enough reviews and we could just fake the reviews, then it just builds a momentum of its own.
Wow, that's an interesting angle. I think that's a bit much for the merchandising department of KMA podcasts.
But we got to make sure there's nothing like there's no like 2-cent like the O-ring or something that it turns out is at fault, and then like
I don't know if I want that hanging over my head.
7 months in, like literally all the cages start failing all across the country.
Yeah, so good idea, and let's give it away for free. I mean, I'm not asking for any royalty on that idea if someone really wants to pursue it.
In fact, I'm asking for a waiver of liability.
I have to declare that I never told anyone to do that because it sounds super dangerous. So don't do that.
The baby cage. Look up the pictures.
I'm going to. I man the soundboard during the episode. I don't have time to be doing my image search.
And even though it sounds like the engine of invention was, or the most of the invention was really going on in America, it did catch on over there in England.
Oh my God.
And I wonder if there's people that were, what would it be, like 40 years old in the early 60s who had memories of that.
Right.
Like, what do you think, FDR, do you think he had signed off on it, or he came home and he's like, what the hell? Like the neighbors left a note.
He's like, if I could get over to you fast enough, I would, strangle you.
Yeah, no, it's like I just drove up. The neighbors were all over me. They said, they must be joking. They said, you got Anna in a cage.
Right, but I think, didn't they try to treat Theodore Roosevelt's asthma with cigars? Like literally, like they smoke cigars. Yeah, I think that was one of the crazy things that they tried. In addition to vigorous exercise and being outdoors all the time, so it was the same concept.
Send him out west.
I could see him in a cage. Like I could see him being like, whatever,
Well, there's one of the first pictures that pops up. There's a baby that looks as if it's basically a mini Teddy Roosevelt. Like I said, like just broad chested, like plump
Hair
cheeks,
parted.
hair parted. Looks like he's on his way to the evening shift at the slaughterhouse. Like just a real we got plenty of food, plenty of milk, none of that pasteurized crap. Just
Right.
all
raw. Yeah.
yeah. So that's it. Baby cages. That is the invention this week.
Super interesting. I can't, again, it's great when you find something that no one will have heard of.
Exactly. Nobody got a Nobel Prize for this one. How about if you took the little child element out of it and you made it really sturdy? I could see a toddler
It's a balcony.
Yeah, but I could see a toddler being interested to go out there and, then you're kind of adventurous.
I guess. I think there's a lot of liability. And it sounds, from an engineering perspective, not worth the effort, because no one's going to do that. All right, well, Doctor, I am not going to tease next week's invention. But what I will say is we are coming up on the end of the Killer Inventions season, right? This is episode 9.
Out of 12.
We go to 12.
True.
So we have 3 left, but we are finalizing the theme for next season. So if people have ideas that they want to suggest, killermeansawesome@gmail.com. But you also have to follow the show.
Exactly. Follow the show, rate and review the show, maybe, and put in your review what you want us to do next season.
Yeah.
And share it with a buddy.
Yeah.
Sharing
is caring.
Yeah. I got that friend over there in working at Stars and Stripes in Japan.
Right.
And I think he has shared it with some of his coworkers.
Fantastic. Which probably explains a lot of our international listeners. So we thank all of you guys.
Yeah. We once had somebody listening in, Iraq.
We did. We've been global. We're global. We're a global pod.
True.
So small but mighty. But yeah, share the show. All right, I'm going to play our theme music, and we will have a new invention, which will be episode 10 of Killer Inventions on the Killer Means Awesome podcast. Dr. Troyer, thank you for a fantastic story.
My pleasure. Take us out.